You have got to stop hating yourself and putting yourself down if you actually want to put yourself in a position to succeed. Unfortunately for me, every about 12 to 18 months over about the last 6 years or so, I've been able to consistently level up into new opportunities. And for a long time, I still hated myself throughout that entire process, like a lot of people do whenever it comes to improving themselves or whatever. And so it wasn't about until 8 to 10 months ago when I realized that there is a massive difference between expecting more of you and hating yourself because you're not where you want to be. And it's a very fine line. But as I have personally continued through this entire journey and have been able to increase my income by about 10x over the last about 6 years and put myself in better positions to level up every single subsequent time I've moved on into something new, I have been able to find a model that works really well for me. And I hope that this same model is going to be able to help you out effectively. And so ultimately, this all comes down to being able to insert your own will into reality in a way that plays to your advantage, or at least in a way that is going to promote you leveling up. But the key to understanding all of this is understanding how the game of life actually works. And at least this is as it makes sense to me based on where I am right now. And I'll be honest, this episode, it's not really a passive consumption type of video. So I don't really recommend watching or listening to this if you're just trying to pass time, because we're going to go pretty deep into some stuff. And it's also important because this is something, if I feel if I would have known about 6 years ago, I would be further along than where I am now. And maybe this whole model and the way to look at things is something that you need in order to be able to start making actual progress and steps in the direction of where you want to go or who you ultimately are trying to be. You have to start taking yourself seriously first. And it's easy to feel like you're stuck on the sidelines of your own life. So you work hard, you try to do the right things, but it's like the world just consistently keeps overlooking you and doesn't see the value that you see inside of you. That's like on some level. And it's insanely frustrating. But you have to take yourself seriously before anybody else is going to. You have to know your value inside before anybody else is going to know what your value is. And of course, like this isn't about being like super polished or perfect or pretending that you have every little bit of who you are figured out. It's about showing up for yourself in a way that basically says like, I'm king shit and the things that I want matter. And my presence here is felt across other people. Because if you don't treat yourself like you are important, why would the universe or reality or anyone else treat you the same way? And like what I mean, like this isn't about ego, having a massive fat ego that's detrimental to you, or this isn't about being overconfident or loud. It's just about respecting yourself enough to claim your space in the world. And to start there is when everything else around you is going to start to be able to shift. And so, what happens when you don't take yourself seriously is this isn't just about missing out on opportunities or not even finding opportunities. It cuts a lot deeper than that. When this happens, you start feeling disconnected from your own divine energy that comes from the universe or God or whatever the hell you want to believe. And maybe you hate yourself for not being further along or for not living up to the potential that you feel like you have. So you feel lost and you feel unsure of your place in the world, and you're stuck in this loop of fitting perfectly into everyone else's plans. But you never take the time to try to fit who you are into your own plans. And so what's constantly going back in your mind at this point, at least how it was for me, is when is it my turn? And that emptiness that you feel, it's not random. It's the direct result of putting off what you need to do and who you need to become and viewing the world as something that can play to your advantage, not something that you have to constantly climb against. And so every time that you let that type of thing slide, It's like giving the world permission to work against you. So you're playing catch up in a game that you're supposed to be winning because nobody knows your life as good as you and nobody knows you as well as you, even on an intuitive, like subconscious level. But once you can recognize some of these patterns that you're doing to yourself, you can start to flip the script around so you can start using life as a tool to play to your advantage rather than climbing this uphill battle like Sisyphus. And so we know that like the harsh reality of all this is like life doesn't cut anyone special deals. I mean, yeah, there are people that are born into certain advantages that you don't have, but ultimately this whole thing is a game. And like any game, it has a specific set of rules. So if you think of chess, there are strategies, pieces, and systems that you have to understand if you want to actually win the game. You don't get to complain about the game being unfair. It's just how it's played. And so you either learn the rules and you learn to play it well, or at least at a competitive pace, or you don't. Like there is no middle ground. And so if you don't know the rules, you're not just losing, you are playing someone else's game entirely. And you end up falling in line with other people's plans and their goals and their agenda. And the worst part is, at least for me, is like you don't even realize it's happening until you look around and wonder why the hell your life feels like it belongs to someone else or that you are just a pawn in somebody else's game. But once you can start to understand these rules, everything changes. You stop being that pawn and you start playing to win your own game and you start trying to find the things that can ultimately work for you. And so, in order to be able to insert our will and what we want out of reality into the world, it begins with shaping your reality instead of letting it shape you. And the first step is understanding one of the most important things that people overlook. People, the people in your life, 99% of people, they need to be told what to do. They need direction. And this goes also for how they treat you. Because whether we realize it or not, people take their cues from you in how they treat you. And when someone meets you for the first time, they have no reference point and no context into how to perceive you and how to treat you. And most of this is subconscious, right? That's why you hear those first 7 seconds whenever you meet somebody is critical. You're either setting the tone or the frame of the conversation or the interaction or their perception of you, or you're letting them decide it for you. And so this is why first impressions matter. There's things like the halo effect and confirmation bias that come into play that all humans just inevitably are going to have in their minds. Once someone forms their initial impression of you, they subconsciously are looking for evidence to continue to support that. And that's why things like your physical presence, so this could be, your physique, how you take care of your body, the way that you come off in terms of like being healthy. This comes down to your tone of voice. This comes down to how much eye contact you give, how much space you take up. All of it has an impact. And of course, like this isn't about being perfect in all of those areas. All it is about showing up in a way that ultimately reflects how you want to be treated and how you want the world to perceive you. So in setting that tone physically, it's only part of the equation. And a lot of people stop there because there's multiple planes of existence. And I picked this up from Neuro Knowledge, one of my favorite YouTube channels right now. But there's 3 levels of existence that we have. You have the physical plane, you have the mental plane, and you have the spiritual plane. So if the only thing you care about, which this was me for a long time, like I only cared about my physical appearance, I was only utilizing 33% of how reality works. So if you're only engaging with that one, there's still another 67% of power that you have in terms of ultimately living how you want to live and having the life that you want to live that you have not even tapped into. And the key is to actually operate across all of these planes. So you have to align your actions, right? You have to align the physicality of life. You have to align the mindset. So how you think about the world, how you see the world, and how you think about yourself, and then the energy you put behind it. So ultimately, that's the vibe. Are you more carefree and fun, or are you rigid and scared And do you walk on eggshells everywhere you go because you don't want to piss anybody off? But whenever you can start to understand how all of these planes work in existence, that's whenever you can start to actually come in and create the reality that you ultimately want. And all of this right now is very high level. And honestly, I still have to continue to dig deeper into each of these. And I hope that as I do, I'll be able to share all this with you. But the first thing I really want to go in, but now I want to go into what the power of the mind is. And so life and controlling the reality that you choose to live in understands the starting of just the power that your mind actually has over you. And so the reality that you're living in, it's not random, even though it might feel like it because 95% of your life is run by your subconscious mind. But the reality that you see around you is a reflection of what is actually going on in here, whether you're aware of it or not. So nothing just shows up in your life that hasn't in some level existed in your thoughts at some point. And this is why typically it sounds so rote and it sounds so cliche, but everything in your life, true change starts from inside and works its way outwards. And so this is, a lot of people talk in the law of attraction or manifestation space where it's not about waiting for the world to just hand you the results and then you can change how you feel internally. It's about changing internally and letting the world actually catch up to you. So your energy, your vibe, it sets the tone for all of it. And so for me, one of the big things is like going from just, 4 years ago being a front desk person at a gym to now operating a $7+ million a year company that we're continuing to scale out and grow started with the vibe that I showed up with when I started in this same company as a salesperson, because I chose that my energy and my vibe is going to set the tone of leadership and actually growing the company, not just staying in my lane based on a fucking title position. And so how you think, how you feel, how you carry yourself creates this like ripple effect that influences every single interaction, opportunity, and result that you encounter. And so when you shift your internal state to match that of the reality you want, and you stop chasing the change or stop getting desperate or stop belittling yourself, instead you start to bring things to you. And I specifically noticed this as with the people that I've worked with, the other leaders in the company, is all of the positive feedback they were giving me, despite how I felt internally. And so because of that, because I chose to act with how I wanted people to perceive me rather than what I actually thought for a period of time, I started to actually see that. It started to confirm it and it started to believe it. And so what a lot of people's issues are is they don't actually just do that step. It's going to feel so uncomfortable and so unlike you. But it kind of goes back to whenever Carl Jung talks about integrating your shadow, there's parts of you basically like, for me, I hated the people that were just loud and obnoxious all the time and overly confident, but I had to develop some of that. And that same thing I hated ultimately is the thing that is continuing to help me level up in life. Now, obviously you don't take all of it, but you start to take pieces and you start to form this version of you that you ultimately want to be. And it's going to be hard because every single person that you've ever had in your life, they see you as a certain way. And so when you start acting differently, they're going to find that weird. But the truth, like cringe is like, you have to go through that period of cringe in order to actually get to where you want to go, because eventually it gets normalized and eventually they get used to it. And then all of a sudden you don't have to worry about the shit anymore. And so the version of you that's actually like kick ass, the one who's confident and unstoppable and living the life you want, you already have that within you. It's not like a distant, like unattainable dream of a person that you have to work for a decade to build. You can actually start to implement these things immediately. Sure, it might take a little bit of time for reality to catch up, but you would be shocked at how quickly things can actually change as long as you continue to commit to it. And so all that you have to do is nurture it. And so what I found is it really only takes about a month of consistently adding in these new characteristics for people to start to catch up to you and for people to start to want and feel that version of you. And so you have to start seeing yourself as that version of you. And so something else that's really powerful that I picked up from Nero is mind and matter are the same energy, right? The only difference is their rate of vibration. And so the example that he uses that I love is like steam and ice. Ice is physical and it's solid, you can hold it, whereas steam, you can't hold it. But they're both matter. It's just different forms and different rates of vibration, but they're the same thing, right? They're water. And so how you can apply this to these characteristic traits and this version of you that you ultimately want to be is you need time for it to solidify. You need time for that vibe to increase so that it solidifies. And basically all it is doing things so much that you eventually just believe it. Because we all know people that have lied about something and deep down they know it's not true, but then they lie to themselves so much that then they genuinely start to believe it. And it's kind of like a form of self-deception, but it's self-deception in a way that's actually going to help you out. And this is the big shift from like reacting to life and actually creating it. Because life's going to trick you that it's like this fixed thing that the world sets in stone and that it's like just the way things are. But that's a fallacy in itself because the external world, it's not rigid or unchangeable. Everything that you see around you, every invention, every structure, or every idea has once existed in someone else's mind before it became reality. If you would have asked people in the early 1800s, mid 1800s, how you get from place to place, they would have just assumed we were going to be on horses and carriages till the end of time. But then there were cars, there were airplanes, and now we have all these methods of transportation that are available to us. But our biggest issue is that we get stuck seeing the world as it is. But the moment that you can shift your perspective and realize that the world is malleable and dynamic, and all that it takes is you putting the version of you into the world that you ultimately want to be, you can start to actually reshape it and have reality respond to you in the way that's appropriate. And this might end up meaning that you have to cut people off that don't align with that. Because it's not about being malicious, but it's if somebody doesn't see you a certain way and they're constantly telling you that, oh, this isn't like you. Oh, what happened to this version of you? That's just going to work against you because it's constantly reaffirming what you're not. And you need things in your life to reaffirm what you are. And so once you can start to see the world this way, you can stop asking for permission and just start making it happen.